Wheel of Genre, the show for readers easily seduced by ghosts and interior design. Right now, we are reading every short story in Ann and Jeff VanderMeer's The Weird anthology, including this one, The Hungry Stones by Rabindranath Tagore. I'm Zach, and this week I'm really interested in figuring out exactly how to place this one in stylistic camps, whether it's worth our time doing that.
I'm Bob, and I'm interested in Tagore. My goodness, I have failed us, Zach. I just got on Wikipedia like anybody, and then Tagore has a page that just goes and goes and goes. I think it's one of the longest Wikipedia articles I have ever seen. Tagore is like the Shakespeare of India, and maybe even more important because he also started schools. He was hanging out with Einstein. He was big into politics. He is so important, and he's one of the main authors in the Bengali Renaissance. We've seen that in A Rising Man by Abir Mukherjee, and we've seen it referenced, I think, that's also referenced, I think, in Song of Kali. But anyway, we know a little bit about that. He is like the poet, the writer for that. He's a Nobel Prize winner. He is so significant, and after reading this, I realized we really, really need to read more of him, and I'm just disappointed that I've never heard of him. Just shocked, really, that I've never heard of this guy before. And I'm like, if anyone can recommend anything that he's read, I would love to read more of him. Or if anyone knows anything more about him, he is so fascinating how much he achieved. It's mind-boggling how much he did.
Yeah, I saw a list of like over 100 works made in his lifetime, and I was like, I don't even know where to where to start with that. But I'm definitely looking for recommendations for sure, and I kind of get the feeling that it's probably not all like this story. It's probably not all weird. It's probably not all genrefied, and that's perfectly fine. I was really interested to learn that in the English-speaking world, there was kind of a moment of popularity for Tagore. A Tagore bubble, if you will, that kind of popped, and then no one read Tagore after that. And I guess where we are in kind of the historical moment is where, for me, I just only hear Tagore referenced in other books about India. So, that's something definitely worth piecing together. But what happened in the story, Bob?
Zach, 1 second. Something clicked in my brain just now. And then we'll talk about the story. I apologize to everyone. I was just thinking the last episode that we recorded was by The Spider by Heinz Ewers. And I read this biography that was quite interesting, but the biographer also references Rabindranath and saying how Rabindranath is so popular, but eventually people stopped reading him. And he says, the same thing is happening to Ewers. You all used to love Ewers, and now you have abandoned him. But he says about Rabindranath, he says, against none other than Rabindranath Tagore, the great Indian writer who today presents you many hundreds of thousands of readers with so much beauty and blesses you with his kindness. And this is in a translated German text. I think it's very interesting that Rabindranath Tagore is everywhere at this point. But let's come back to the story. I like the finger-wagging nature of that,
yes,
you know? Yes. The finger wag.
Okay, so tell me about this story. What do we got here? What's going on?
So this is a classic kind of haunting story is what it feels like. There's someone who goes into a mansion and they find out it's a haunted mansion. I just realized it's a haunted mansion, just like Disneyland. But the ghosts seem mostly to be, no one seems to be really malevolent. It's all very like beautiful scenes. They're all quite almost mythical or romantic scenes. I mean, there will be like people having a party, like these ghosts having a party, all of these sounds of like ghost jewelry and ghost fun, while this guy is wandering around and kind of it seems like he's having visions of these things, or these things appear in front of them like apparitions, and they're kind of haunting him there. And eventually he finds a way out, kind of, but there is a weird frame to this story that interrupts that way out, and the ending is almost spoiled. It's taken away from us in a really interesting way.
The character of these kind of ghostly fantasies is so interesting to me, because the person who's experiencing these kind of reveries and kind of waking daydreams that sometimes almost slip into nightmare, they are living in kind of a post-British India, something a little bit more drab, a little bit more modern, I guess maybe is something we could say. But the character of these fantasies feels like the kind of writings that like Edward Said was kind of critiquing in his book Orientalism. It like the way that Western writers wrote or used to write, or maybe possibly still write about, the Near East, perfumes, kind of sexual permissiveness, a kind of, haziness about a kind of dreamy, sensual landscape. That's the character of his fantasies, but he seems to be imagining a world from centuries before, from something in the deep, deep past. And I use the word imagine, and I think that might be showing my cards a little bit too much, because it's meant to be ambiguous as to whether it is truly, whether it's a fantasy, whether it's an imagination, or whether it is actually a haunting, something bursting out from the past or seeping into modern life. But it all seems to be centered around this house, which he was warned not to stay in. You have that classic thing of someone being like, don't enter the haunted mansion, And it says, before a week had passed, the place began to exert a weird fascination upon me. It is difficult to describe or to induce people to believe, but I felt as if the whole house was like a living organism, slowly and imperceptibly digesting me by the action of some stupefying gastric juice. Wow. What a line.
Yes, it's a living house. Later, we find out that every stone is kind of imbued with these hauntings. So the house, the foundation itself, it's not just these ghosts wandering around. It's the house, which is almost projecting these hauntings and its own history out from the stones. So the hauntings will be different as he goes around. I think it's really interesting how you said that it's hard to tell. Is this like an Orientalist kind of extravagance of luxury and whatever, that kind of stuff? Is that what he's playing with? Or is it the 250 years ago, which myth, I guess, is haunting this place? Is it the British idea of India, or is it the Indians' idea of India that's coming and haunting this place? I really like one of the other opening lines, too. Like, Rabindranath is just a great writer. Tagore is just a great writer. But here's another intro about what the house is. He says, about 250 years ago, the Emperor Mahmud Shah II had built this lonely palace for his pleasure and luxury. In his days, jets of rose water spurted from its fountains, and on the cold marble floors of its spray-cooled rooms, young Persian damsels would sit, their hair disheveled, before bathing and splashing their soft naked feet in the clear water of the reservoirs. And it just goes and goes with these details that you mentioned. But I think what's interesting, too, is the frame where the person who's telling the story is just a guy on a train. And the people who first narrate what's going on to us are two friends. They're in a kind of an argument. One is a theosophist and the other is not really. They're kind of arguing. Then they hear this guy, just a guy on a train talking about a haunted story, and they start writing everything down. And then eventually, the train stops, the guy gets onto the first class train, they're stuck there in second class, and they never get to find out what happens again. We never get to find out where this myth comes from and whose myth it really is.
And what I really loved about this is that the conversation ends their friendship. So the one guy says, the man evidently took us for fools and imposed upon us out of fun. The story is pure fabrication from start to finish. The discussion that followed ended in a lifelong rupture between my theosophist kinsman and myself. So the narrator thinks that it was all put on. The other guy thinks it's real. And, I just want to say, I think that there is a connection here between this and the question that you posed earlier about how to interpret it. The person experiencing all of this is an Indian man, but he's wearing British clothing, And then as the story goes, as he experiences more of this, he stops wearing his British costume, his administrator costume, and all of this really makes me wonder, what is the message we're supposed to take away from this? Is it supposed to be a kind of condemnation about maybe the drabness of the then present India? You know what I mean? Does the writer want us to feel we have to go back to this old time? Or is it a warning about like the kind of seductiveness of nostalgia? You know what I mean? Like, is it a warning about how, we imagine a much more prosperous past as a kind of like way to escape from the present, or maybe for political ends when people talk about, we need to go back to how things were back then. It's beautifully ambiguous about how exactly we're supposed to interpret this. And I get the hunch that the friend breakup at the end, even though we don't get the heart of the discussion, it seems like none of the characters in this story can agree either on how to interpret what these experiences meant.
I think the dangers of nostalgia is really interesting here. It's like a sinister nostalgia, or like nostalgia has jaws, it's going to eat you up and you can never escape it. The haunting of this place where the stones themselves are haunted and the stones themselves are doing these things. It feels like there's something dangerous to this. Not a we should return to the past, but oh no, if we're obsessed with that, the past is going to gobble us up. There's this quote here where he's talking about when he finds there's this old man who keeps going around saying, what does he say? It's all fake, run away, something like that. And he finally confronts this guy and says, what the hell is going on here? And he finds out from him, here's the quote, that at one time countless unrequited passions and unsatisfied longings and lurid flames of wild blazing pleasure raged within that palace, and that the curse of all the heartaches and blasted hopes had made its every stone thirsty and hungry, eager to swallow up like a famished ogress any living man who might chance to approach. And he calls them cruel jaws later. I think the myth, the nostalgia here, is a monster, and it is a monster that can build a foundation. That is the mansion here.
I wish I had something intelligent to respond, but I'm just kind of stuck on that phrase, famished ogress. Damn, that's great. Well, so, as I was reading this, I started to wonder, you're the expert on this one. You know a lot more about Gothic literature than me. So how is this not Gothic lit? How is this different than a book like The Castle of Otranto? I mean, obviously the setting's different, but it's unclear to me how this transcends Gothic literature into being, what the editors classify as the weird. Do you have any ideas, or are you as stuck as I am?
We need Barbie on this one. She's the Gothic expert. But if anyone's watching this and you have opinions about this, why is it Gothic fiction? That would be great. But I've got a guess that... No, my guess already failed. I'm going to tell my guess and then show you how it fails. I was thinking maybe it's the frame story of these two friends and then, calling into question whether it existed or not. But Castle of Otranto is like that too. It begins like, look, I found this document. Here it is. This document is this novel, which you're now going to read. That's almost every Gothic fiction novel. And you can always... It's like a gift to the reader to decide whether or not you're going to believe it's true. But this, maybe because the friendship ends, maybe because it's never really clear if there's really a monster or if it's just his nostalgia haunting him. But I guess the house itself has nostalgia. So maybe it's that the object itself is the thing that's dreaming, and it's not just actual ghosts. It's a architectural... No, that fails too. I'm sure that haunted mansions. I don't know.
Well, yeah, well, I guess I would say also that Castle of Otranto feels more explicitly horror-tinged than this. And this feels slightly more fantastic. But then I could easily point out this moment where, let's see, maybe I don't want to read this whole paragraph, but... he's getting we'll call it the tender touch of hands and the gentle murmurs in the ears and the fragrant breaths on his brow. And then a mysterious serpent twists her stupefying coils around his body, and heaving a heavy sigh, he lapses into insensibility and a profound slumber. So even if the imagery doesn't feel as, traditional horror in this, there's still a kind of danger of being seduced, danger of lapsing into sensuality is present here, as exemplified by the snake, the many hands of the women turning into just a snake that's kind of choking the life out of him before it devours him. I don't know. It feels like the same operation, just moved into a different aesthetic context for me. But like you said, I think this might be a question for anyone watching right now. We might be in over our heads on this one, Bob.
That scene reminds me a lot of Dracula, where the brides of Dracula are surrounding Harker. But otherwise, that's still Gothic fiction. So yeah, I would love any help anyone has on this one. And we got to read more of Tagore. This was just, the writing is just stunning. This is a great story.
Let's find a way to prioritize that in the very, very near future. Meanwhile, we got a lot more weird fiction to read. So I'll talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later, Zach.